Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Field's Guide to Voodoo by Julie Mulhern, narrated by Renée Chambliss. Chapter 1. You can't fight fate. My college roommate, Adele Coombs, lifted a Pim's cup to her lips, but didn't drink. Instead, she stared at the street below us. We sat on the veranda at the Columns Hotel, at a table covered with a green linen cloth. A gentle breeze cooled our skin. The street below us was St. Charles Avenue, and any minute now, another trolley would roll by. We were supposed to be talking about a week's worth of festivities. I was supposed to make sure that every event was correctly entered into the calendar on my cell. But Adele had turned philosophical. I blamed the gin. Sure you can. Adele laughed softly. Maybe you can. Was she having second thoughts? Adele, if you're not 100% certain about Carter, don't marry him. Oh, I'm sure about Carter. A small smile curled her lips. Carter and I are fine. It's this... She side-eyed the tables closest to us, leaned forward, and lowered her voice. This production is too much. Elope. Her eyes widened as if I'd suggested she run naked down Canal Street. I'm the first Coombs daughter in 4 generations. Daddy, my uncles, my aunts, they'd all kill me. Not to mention Mama. She shuddered. I'm all in on this one, and it has to be perfect. Adele was right about the expectations settled upon her shoulders. She was also right about the production. The wedding was more than a week away, and it seemed as if every minute, right up until the exchange of vows, was spoken for. There were luncheons and showers, and cocktail parties and fittings, and a bachelorette spa day. Not to mention the rehearsal dinner and the brunch the day after the wedding. I'd had no idea what I was signing up for when I'd agreed to be a bridesmaid. In just over a week, you'll be on a beach in St. Bart's. You're right. You're right. If I focus on that, I might survive the crazy. Adele sat back in her chair. I can't believe I'm complaining about crazy to you. Hopefully, I've got all my crazy out of the way. I'd been kidnapped by a Mexican drug lord, then sucked into a plot to blow up Paris. I'd also been recruited to work for a secret government agency. Not that Adele knew about that. While she and Carter were enjoying their honeymoon, I'd be at some sort of spy basic training. Tell me about Paris. Adele regarded me with cornflower blue eyes. Those eyes, coupled with her blonde hair and tiny frame, gave her more than a passing resemblance to a Madame Alexander doll. Anything you read in the papers is probably true. Your mother saved Sacré-Cœur? Not that, but I wasn't about to tell anyone, not even one of my best friends, what really happened. Parisians are treating her like she's Wonder Woman. It's officially her favorite city on the planet. She may never leave. Sheriffs in Paris? She winced at the rhyme. Doesn't that make your life easier? Being my roommate, Adele had seen firsthand the challenges of being a movie star's daughter. Nothing about Sheriffs is easy, ever. Seriously, what happened? She scowled at the phone, vibrating on the table. It's Mama. Do you mind? If I don't answer, she'll just keep calling. Go ahead. Consuela, the chihuahua who'd adopted me, was curled in my lap. She lifted her sleepy head and yawned. I scratched behind her ears and gazed past the enormous white columns that gave the hotel its name. Traffic on St. Charles sped by. While people in New Orleans might take a laissez, temps, rouler attitude towards drinking, dining, music, and life in general, they drove like maniacs. Case in point, some lunatic in a Mercedes G-Wagon raced toward us at what had to be 100 miles an hour. What an idiot, I whispered to Consuela. Grrr. The G-Wagon wove through traffic, almost as if it were being pursued. It clipped a bumper, spun out of control, and wrapped itself around a light pole in front of the hotel. The sound of crunching metal had everyone on the terrace dropping their jaws and jumping out of their chairs. The G-Wagon's passenger's door opened, and a man staggered out of the car. He was short and stocky, and his face was covered in blood. In his left hand, he clutched a pistol. Before any of the people on the veranda could do more than gasp, the man lurched toward us. "Mama, I gotta go." Adele dropped her phone. In the street, a Range Rover screeched to a stop. Doors flew open and men poured out of the vehicle. Men with guns. Guns bigger than a pistol. "Get down." I pushed Adele and Consuela to the concrete. And just in time. The man with the pistol dashed up the stairs and into the hotel. The men pursuing him opened fire. Bullets whizzed by us, shattering glass, reducing tables to sticks, pocking the hotel's wood siding. I reached for my handbag and my gun. Not that a .22 was much use against 6 men armed with AR-15s. 3 of the men vaulted onto the veranda, raced past us, and burst through the remains of the front door. Next to me, Adele raised up on her hands and knees. "Don't move," I whispered. "Stay down." But stay down. Hopefully, my tone conveyed what a monumentally awful idea drawing attention was. Grrr. Consuela agreed with my assessment. One of the men who'd run into the hotel appeared at the door. He escaped out the back. The 3 men still standing in the lawn raced to the Range Rover, piled in, and sped away. The man in the doorway swept his gaze over the people cowering on the terrace. 6 feet tall, dark hair, brown eyes, a divot in his chin. I'd recognize him again. I lowered my eyes before he caught me staring. When I looked up a second time, he was gone. For a few seconds, the silence stretched. Then a woman's cries rose to the ceiling fans still whirring above us. "We need help! He's hit!" a man yelled. I shifted, relieving the pressure where the concrete pressed into my hip bone. "Are you okay?" "Yep." Consuela was okay, and she was pissed. Adele's eyes were the size of shot glasses, and she looked pale beneath her tan, but she nodded and stood. Okay. Where are you going?" "I'm going to see if I can help." She blinked, as if she was having trouble waking from a nightmare. Then she shook her head. Adele hurried across the destroyed terrace to the man who'd been shot. I reached for Consuela, held her close, and felt her enormous little heart beating against my chest. "I need to help too." She understood. I put her down on a chair that was miraculously unscathed and followed Adele. My friend knelt in a pool of blood, applying pressure to a wound. "What do you need?" "Clean linen." None of the linen on the terrace qualified. "I'll look inside." The lobby was a long hallway, ending in an ornate staircase and a marble-topped check-in counter. It seemed oddly familiar. There was not a soul in sight. I took another step. Glass crunched beneath the soles of my shoes. "Hello?" I called. No one answered. A trail of blood led down the hallway. I certainly didn't want to go that way. Instead, I peeked into a bright, airy room. There were tables set for dinner. I snatched the tablecloths and napkins. The silverware clattered to the floor. I pushed through the survivors on the veranda. Some were crying. Others cradled injured limbs. One man wasn't moving. His eyes stared sightlessly at the porch's painted ceiling. I draped one of the tablecloths over his body. Nearby, a woman was digging through the wreckage of her table with her right hand. "I can't find my phone. I can't find my phone. I can't find my phone." She held the phone in her left. The sirens were close, but not close enough. I sank onto the concrete next to Adele. "Thanks." She took the linens without looking up from her patient. "When the police or EMTs get here, he needs help right away. Can you tell them?" "Got it." I picked up Consuela and stumbled out onto the lawn. When the first police car arrived, I rushed up to the officer who opened the passenger door. Officer Becker, according to the gold name tag on his chest. "There's a man on the front porch who's been shot. I think it's pretty bad." His gaze traveled from me, a young woman clutching a chihuahua and an Hermes bag, to the destroyed G-Wagon, to the destroyed terrace. "I'll call it in." "My friend's an emergency room nurse," I continued. "She said the man needed help right away." Officer Becker spoke into the radio attached to his shoulder, requesting additional units, ambulances, and, he glanced at the G-Wagon, a homicide unit. When he was done, he looked at me. "What happened?" I pointed to the G-Wagon, told him about the Range Rover, the men, and the guns. I talked until I spotted an EMT climbing out of a just-arrived ambulance. "I need to take him to Adele." I left Officer Becker before he had a chance to respond. On the veranda, the EMT pushed through the crowd of still-stunned people and knelt next to Adele. A moment later, Adele stood. Her dress was soaked in blood and her hands were crimson. Her eyes were still too big for her face. She stumbled toward me. "I did my best. Is he? I don't think he's going to make it." I pulled her out of the way as additional emergency personnel pushed a gurney onto the terrace. "Let's give our statements and get you home." News vans were arriving. Adele didn't need to be on television. Not covered in blood. Not the week before her wedding. I found Officer Becker on the veranda and tapped him on the shoulder. "Excuse me?" "Yeah?" "I'm taking my friend home." He eyed Adele's blood-soaked dress and frowned. "Are either of you hurt?" "No." His frown deepened. "Sorry, I can't let you go." I understood. I did. But I also understood the press would have a field day if I was photographed in the midst of this. Then there was the not inconsequential concern of Adele moving from the society page to the front page. Her mama would not approve. "Where's the detective in charge?" He pointed to a man peering into the G-Wagon. Across St. Charles, a news van parked at the curb. "Can she at least go inside?" Again, he frowned. "Crime scene." "Adele?" I led her to a chair. "Sit here and don't move. I'll be right back." She nodded and folded herself onto the chair. "Here, hold Consuela." Consuela, her eyes bright, settled into Adele's arms and yipped softly, as if she understood her role, to comfort. I reached into my handbag, pushed my gun aside, and grabbed an enormous pair of sunglasses. When they were perched on my nose, I marched across the lawn and waited for the detective to notice me. I gave him 30 seconds, then cleared my throat. He turned and looked at me. He was about 30. And Dennis Quaid as Remy McSwain, handsome. Good-looking in an "I'm likely to lie to you and trample your heart" way. I located the hinge in my jaw and snapped my mouth closed. "Who are you?" he asked. I glanced back at Adele and Consuela. Adele had buried her face in Consuela's fur. "I'm Poppy Fields." The detective frowned. "Yeah, right. What's your real name?" He might look like Remy McSwain, but he was nowhere near as charming. Remy would have smiled at me and said, "Sure you are, Cher." "My name is Poppy Fields. I was having a drink with a friend when this..." I waved my hand at the wrecked G-Wagon, the wrecked veranda, the windows reduced to shards of glass. "Happened. I'd like to give my statement and leave." "You'll have to wait your turn." "Listen." I held out my hands and pretended not to see the blood wringing my fingernails. "My friend is a nurse, and she was helping the man on the terrace who was shot. She's covered in blood. She's traumatized, and I'd like to take her home." He stared at me for a moment. "What did you see?" I told him everything that had happened, and included descriptions of the man who'd run from the G-Wagon and the man who'd stood at the doorway to the hotel. When I was done, he rubbed his chin. "Is that it?" Was that sarcasm I heard in his voice? "Look, I'm in town for a week. I'll give you my cell number. Please, I'd like to take Adele home." His gaze sharpened. "Adele?" "Adele Coombs. I'm here for her wedding." "Pete Coombs' daughter?" "Yes." "Go. But I'll be in touch soon." "Thank you, detective." I paused. "I don't know your name." "Renée Langlois." "Thanks for letting us go, Detective Langlois." He shrugged off my thanks. "If you're a friend of Pete Coombs' daughter, I reckon you better call me Renée." I was really Pete's daughter's friend. "Thank you, Renée." I felt his gaze on me as I walked back to Adele. The detective said we could leave. "I'm going to the hospital with him." She pointed to the man being wheeled past us. I looked out at the lawn and St. Charles Avenue. There were police and emergency personnel and reporters everywhere. Especially reporters. They were multiplying like rabbits. "I'll drive you. Can we get out through the back?" Adele reached into her handbag, pulled out a fob, and held it out to me. "Take the car key. I'm going in the ambulance." "Adele, I'm going with the ambulance," she repeated. "But I can tell the doctors exactly what I did for him." Adele might look like a delicate doll, but her spine was made of forged steel. There was no point in arguing with her when her mind was set. "Fine." I opened my palm. "I'll follow you." She dropped the fob into my hand and followed the gurney down the steps, speaking over her shoulder. "Don't do that. There's no telling how long I'll be. Go home. I'll call you later." I watched her stop and exchange a few words with Renée Langlois. I watched her convince the EMTs to let her ride in the ambulance, and I watched the vehicle drive away. "Come on." I tucked Consuela into my arms, and we escaped the chaos on the veranda. Inside, the same eerie sense of having been there before stopped me in my tracks. This place seems so familiar. "It's the movie." A uniformed officer stepped into the hallway and regarded me with suspicion. "The movie?" "Pretty Baby was filmed here." Sheris had made me sit through every Louis Malle film ever made, multiple times. I knew this house. I'd watched a 12-year-old Brooke Shields run through this house. I knew the way to the backyard. Except the police officer blocked my path. "I'll have to ask you to step outside, ma'am." Detective Langlois said I could go. He hadn't said I could cut through the hotel, but that was just a detail. A detail not worth mentioning. I won't touch anything, I promise. You can walk me to the back door. I offered up a tremulous smile. Consuela regarded him with pleading button eyes. We were a 1-2 punch of feminine wiles. He caved. This way. I followed the officer through the hotel and stepped into a backyard blessedly free of reporters. Thank you. You have a car nearby? It's parked on the street. He nodded and scanned the charming backyard for gun-toting killers. Finding none, he said, Take care, ma'am. A gate led to the sidewalk, which Adele insisted on calling a banquette. 2 minutes later, I was behind the wheel of Adele's Cayenne, with Consuela perched in the passenger seat next to me. I fastened my seatbelt and leaned my head back against the soft leather. Grrr. What's wrong? I asked. Consuela turned her head and looked into the back seat. I glanced in the rearview mirror. A man, the man who'd crawled out of the G-Wagon, rose up from the floorboards and pressed his gun against my head. The metal on my skin was cool in the stuffy car. I shivered. What do you want? I held up my shaking hands. Start the car. I met his dark gaze in the mirror. I'll give you the keys. Take the car. Just let us go. The man snorted his opinion of that idea. Start the car. With a trembling finger, I pushed the ignition button and the Porsche purred to life. Drive. I tightened my clammy hands around the wheel. Where? The docks. My gaze shifted to my handbag on the seat next to Consuela. So close, but much too far. I don't know where that is. Take Chapatulas. Take what? The pressure of the gun against my temple increased. Drive toward the river. That I understood. I pulled onto the street. There's a roadblock ahead. The police had closed access to St. Charles. Turn around. This is a one-way street. Do it, he growled. He had the gun. I pulled into a driveway and turned the car the wrong direction. Take a right on Carondelet. I did as I was told. Now, take a right on Foucher. We headed back toward St. Charles, but a police car, white with bright blue lettering, blocked access to the avenue. When traffic cleared, we'd be able to cross or turn left. What do I do? Cross. He leaned back, presumably so the patrolman who directed traffic wouldn't see the gun pointed at my head. I glanced at Consuela. She stared back at me, then hopped from her front seat to the floorboards. I took a breath. It was now or never. I jammed my foot onto the gas pedal and the car shot forward. A quick jerk of the wheel, and Adele's new Porsche, a wedding gift from her fiancé, slammed into the parked police car. Bang! The air in the car reverberated with the gun's shot. The deploying airbag knocked me backward and emptied my lungs. For a few long seconds, I gasped for air. Then I groped for my handbag. Bitch! The Porsche's back door opened. My fingers closed around my gun. Bang! The man was out of the car and he was shooting. But not at me. The damned airbag! I couldn't see what was happening. Bang! Somehow, I unfastened my seatbelt, opened the door, and stumbled onto the pavement. The man who'd been in my back seat strode toward the fallen police officer. The officer clutched at his side with one hand and barely hung onto his gun with the other. There was no doubt in my mind what happened next. Stop! My unwanted passenger stopped. He turned at my voice. He pointed his gun at me. My breath caught in my throat. Adrenaline roared through my system. The sounds around me faded to quiet. He lifted his gun another inch. I shot him. Chapter 2. I spent the first 14 years of my life in Montana with my dad. I loved pleasing my father, and I learned quickly what pleased him most was my winning shooting competitions. I also learned, with practice, I could shoot better than just about anyone. The decade since Dad's death hadn't affected my aim. The man who'd shot the police officer jerked backward and fell to the pavement. My stomach fell with him. Everything my dad ever taught me, everything I knew about guns, everything I knew about bad guys, went into that shot. What I'd learned from my dad: if you're going to point a gun at another human being, be sure you mean it. What I'd learned from working for Mr. Brown: shoot to kill. Knowing and feeling were two different things. I'd killed someone, and I felt sick. Wobbly, regretting that Pim's cup sick. The wounded police officer simply gaped at me. Maybe that was all he could do. The hand pressed against his side was stained a wet crimson, and he was shaking. "Put the gun down!" Two new police officers had guns aimed at me. My stomach lurched again. This was supposed to be a last hurrah trip before I went into Mr. Brown's version of spy boot camp. I was supposed to drink cocktails, eat ridiculous amounts of decadent food, and flirt with handsome Southern men named Beau or Luke or Atticus. Instead, I'd shot a man dead, and two uniformed police officers looked as if they might shoot me. Not that I blamed them. They'd just arrived and hadn't seen who shot their fellow officer. All they saw was a wounded comrade, a man with a hole between his eyes, and a woman with a gun. "I'm putting it down." I bent slowly and placed my gun on the pavement, carefully so as not to scratch the mother-of-pearl handle. Then I stepped back. "Hands up!" barked one of the officers. He had a mustache positively quivering with outrage. I raised my hands above my head. "Kick the gun toward me." Mustache was very bossy, and very crazy if he thought I was kicking a pearl-handled gun across a rough pavement. "She saved me," said the bleeding officer. "She what?" Mustache's disbelieving tone was a bit offensive. "She took him out with one shot." The injured man nodded toward the dead one. "How bad are you hurt?" asked Mustache. "A bullet grazed my ribs." Well, that was a relief. "May I lower my hands?" "Don't move." The sense of car exhaust and testosterone swirled around me. I didn't move a muscle. Mustache stepped forward and picked up my gun. The other newly arrived officer, one who was too young to possess such ancient blue eyes, stared at me as if he'd never seen a woman in a DVF jumpsuit before. Granted, I'd ignored Adele's Southern dress memo, the one requiring women to wear bright colors, ruffles, floral prints, or lots of monograms. But my jumpsuit wasn't daring, or revealing. "I saw you on television," said old Blue Eyes. That was probably my mother. He shook his head. "You're Poppy Fields." He had seen me on TV. "Yes. May I lower my hands now?" He nodded. "Fine." "Wait." Mustache glared at his partner. "Who is she?" "That party girl who got abducted by the Sinaloan drug lord." What a description. Mustache narrowed his eyes and reassessed my threat factor. The Louboutin heels, the DVF jumpsuit, the Hermes bag swinging from the crook of my arm. The wrecked Cayenne. He lowered his gun. Fine, put your hands down. I lowered my hands slowly.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?